The frost came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains like a hungry wolf, and Callum Grayson found the orc woman collapsed at the edge of his timber line, just as the first snow began to fall. She was curled against the base of an ancient pine, her green skin tinged an alarming shade of blue, her breath coming in shallow gasps that formed tiny clouds in the frigid air. Callum had been checking his trap lines when he spotted her, and his first instinct was to reach for the hunting knife at his belt, but something about the way she trembled stopped him cold. She was half his size, smaller than any orc he had ever seen, and clearly dying. Callum had fought orcs during his 5 years in the border militia. He had seen what their raiding parties could do to a homestead, the devastation they left behind. Every reasonable part of his mind told him to walk away, to let the cold finish what it had started. But when her eyes fluttered open, dark amber meeting his own pale blue, he saw something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he could not name. Fear, pain, and beneath it all, a desperate will to survive that he recognized from his own darkest moments. He made his decision in a heartbeat. Callum shrugged off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her trembling form, then lifted her into his arms. She was surprisingly light despite her muscular build, and he could feel her bones through his coat, sharp against his chest. She had been starving, he realized, long before the cold had found her. Her eyes rolled back as consciousness left her, and Callum quickened his pace, his boots crunching through the thin layer of snow as he headed back toward his cabin. The walk took 15 minutes that felt like an eternity. By the time he kicked open his cabin door, his arms were burning and his breath came in ragged gasps. The interior was barely warmer than outside, the morning fire having died down to embers. Callum laid the orc woman on his bed, the only proper piece of furniture in the single-room cabin aside from a table and 2 chairs, then turned his attention to the fireplace. He worked with practiced efficiency, clearing the old ash, arranging kindling and logs in a pattern his father had taught him 20 years ago. The tinder caught quickly, and soon flames were licking up the sides of the logs. He added more wood, bigger pieces, until the fire roared with satisfying heat. Only then did he return to the bed. The orc woman was still shaking, violent tremors that made the bed frame creak. Her lips had gone almost white, a stark contrast to the green of her face, and her breathing remained dangerously shallow. Callum had seen men die of cold exposure during his militia days. He knew the signs. Body heat, he remembered the field surgeon saying. Sometimes it is the only thing that works. He hesitated for only a moment before gathering the orc woman back into his arms. She weighed so little it frightened him. He carried her to the fireplace and settled himself on the floor directly in front of the roaring flames, arranging her so that she sat between his legs, her back pressed against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, trying to share as much warmth as possible. The heat from the fire washed over them both, almost painful in its intensity. Callum held the orc woman close, feeling each shuddering breath she took, willing his own body heat to seep into her frozen flesh. Minutes passed, then an hour. Gradually, painfully slowly, the violent shaking began to subside. The blue tinge faded from her skin, replaced by a healthier green. Her breathing deepened, became more regular. Callum found himself studying her features in the firelight. She was young, probably no more than 20. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. 2 small tusks, no longer than his thumb, protruded from her lower lip. Her ears were pointed, poking out from beneath a tangle of black hair that fell past her shoulders. Even half-starved and nearly frozen to death, there was a fierce beauty to her that made something in his chest constrict. He must have dozed off at some point because the next thing he knew, the woman in his arms was stirring. Callum jerked awake, his hand instinctively moving toward his knife before he remembered the situation. The orc woman's eyes opened slowly, blinking in confusion as she took in her surroundings. When her gaze landed on Callum's face, so close to her own, her whole body went rigid. "Easy," Callum said softly. "You are safe. I found you in the woods, nearly frozen to death." The orc woman stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she tried to pull away, but her body was still too weak. She managed only a few inches before her strength gave out and she sagged back against him. "I said you are safe," Callum repeated. "I am not going to hurt you." "Why?" Her voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. "Why would you help me?" It was a fair question, and Callum did not have a good answer. "Because you were dying," he said finally. "And I am not the kind of man who can walk away from that." She was silent for a long time, her amber eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was telling the truth. Finally, she spoke again. "My name is Clara Corehammer, Callum Grayson." He loosened his grip slightly, giving her more room to move if she wanted to. "How long since you last ate?" Clara's jaw tightened. 3 days, maybe 4, I lost track." Callum carefully shifted her off his lap and stood, his joints protesting after sitting on the hard floor for so long. "Stay by the fire. I will make you something." He moved to his small kitchen area, little more than a counter and some shelves along one wall. His stores were modest, but he had what he needed. He pulled out a pot, filled it with water from the barrel by the door, and set it over the fire to heat. While he waited for it to boil, he cut chunks of dried venison into small pieces and added them to the pot along with some winter carrots, onions, and herbs. Clara watched him work in silence. She had pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders and was holding her hands out toward the flames. The color had mostly returned to her face, though she still looked gaunt and exhausted. "You should not be here," she said finally. "If my clan finds out a human helped me, it will go badly for you." Callum stirred the pot, not looking at her. "Why would your clan care?" "Because I am supposed to hate you. We are supposed to hate all humans." Her voice was bitter. "That is what they teach us from the moment we can walk. Humans are the enemy. Humans killed our ancestors. Humans drove us from our lands." "Did they?" Callum asked. He did not know much about orc history. The militia had not been interested in teaching such things. "I do not know," Clara admitted. "Maybe, my grandmother says yes. My mother was not so sure, but it does not matter what the truth is. The hate is real enough." Callum ladled some of the stew into a wooden bowl and brought it to her. "Can you hold this?" Clara took the bowl with both hands, and Callum noticed how her fingers trembled. She took a small sip, then another, her eyes closing in what looked like relief. He returned to the pot and filled a second bowl for himself, then settled back down on the floor beside her. They ate in silence for several minutes. Clara drank the broth slowly, occasionally chewing on small pieces of meat. Callum could see her forcing herself not to gulp it down, knowing that her stomach could not handle too much too quickly after days of starvation. "How did you end up out there?" he asked when his own bowl was half empty. Clara was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she set her bowl down and pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I was cast out. The elders decided I was not fit to remain with the clan." "Why?" "Because I questioned them." Her voice hardened. "Because I asked why we continue to raid human settlements when it only brings more soldiers to our borders. Because I suggested that maybe, just maybe, there could be another way forward besides endless fighting and dying." Callum absorbed this. "They exiled you for that. Worse than exile. They cast me out with nothing. No weapons, no supplies, no food. They wanted me to die, but they wanted to keep their hands clean by letting the wilderness do it for them. She laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. And it almost worked. I am sorry, Callum said, and meant it. Clara looked at him sharply. Why, you do not know me. For all you know, I have killed humans myself, raided your people's farms, burned their homes. Have you? No. The admission came quietly. I never went on the raids. I always found reasons to stay behind. The elders knew that too. It was part of why they wanted me gone. Darkness was falling outside the cabin windows. The fire had burned down somewhat, and Callum added more logs, building it back up. The temperature was still dropping, and he could hear the wind picking up, whistling through the trees around his homestead. You can stay here tonight, he said. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next. Clara studied him with those unsettling amber eyes. You are either very kind or very foolish, Callum Grayson. Probably both, he admitted. He gave Clara the bed while he made himself a pallet of blankets on the floor near the fire. She protested weakly, but he could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. Within minutes of lying down, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Callum lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling beams and trying to understand what he had done. Helping Clara was more than just an act of mercy. If anyone found out he was harboring an orc, even a cast-out one, he would be labeled a traitor. The local settlements barely tolerated him as it was, suspicious of anyone who chose to live alone in the deep woods. This would give them all the excuse they needed to drive him out, or worse. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Clara collapsed against that tree, shaking with cold, moments from death. And he knew, whatever the consequences, he could not have walked away. The next morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Callum woke to find Clara sitting at the table, his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. She had stoked the fire and was staring into the flames with an expression he could not read. "How do you feel?" he asked, sitting up and stretching the stiffness from his shoulders. "Better. Warmer." She glanced at him. "Thank you. For what you did yesterday. You saved my life." Callum nodded and stood, moving to prepare breakfast. He mixed flour and water into a simple batter and cooked flat cakes on a griddle over the fire, then spread them with honey from his small store. Clara ate 3 of them, and some color returned to her cheeks. "I should leave today," she said when they had finished eating. "I have put you in enough danger already." "And go where?" Callum asked. "You have no supplies, no weapons, and winter is here. You would not last 2 days." "That is my problem, not yours. Actually, I am making it my problem." Callum stood and moved to a chest in the corner of the room. He pulled out a spare set of clothes, heavier wool items he had been saving for when his current outfit wore out. "Here. These will fit you better than that dress you are wearing, and they will be warmer." Clara took the clothes hesitantly. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it is the right thing to do." He turned his back to give her privacy to change. "And because I know what it is like to be cast out. The militia discharged me 5 years ago after I refused an order. I have been out here alone ever since." "What order did you refuse?" Callum was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat. "They wanted me to execute orc prisoners, women and children taken in a raid. I told my commanding officer it was murder, not war. He disagreed. So here I am." He heard the rustle of fabric as Clara changed clothes. When she told him he could turn around, she was wearing his old wool pants and shirt. They were too large on her smaller frame, but she had rolled up the sleeves and cuffs to make them work. She looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "You sacrificed your career for orc women and children you did not even know." "I sacrificed a career I was no longer proud of," Callum corrected. "There is a difference." He moved to the door and pulled on his coat and boots. "I need to check my trap lines. You can stay here where it is warm. There are books on the shelf if you can read. Help yourself to whatever food you want. I can come with you, Clara offered. I am not useless. Callum considered this. She was still weak, but the stubbornness in her voice told him arguing would be pointless. All right, but we go slow, and if you get tired, you tell me immediately. They spent the morning walking Callum's trap lines through the snow-covered forest. He had set a dozen snares in a wide circle around his cabin, checking them every few days for rabbits or other small game. Today they found 2 rabbits, which Callum quickly and efficiently dispatched and added to the game bag slung over his shoulder. Clara moved quietly through the woods, and Callum noticed she had a natural grace to her movements despite her weakened state. She studied his traps carefully, asking questions about how they worked and why he placed them where he did. It reminded him that she had been part of a clan that lived off the land. This was her element as much as his. Your people hunt differently than humans, do not they? He asked as they made their way back toward the cabin. Yes, we use weapons mostly, spears, bows, throwing axes. Traps are considered cowardly by most of my clan. She paused. I always thought that was stupid. A dead rabbit is a dead rabbit no matter how you catch it. Callum found himself almost smiling at that. Practical thinking. Probably another thing the elders did not like about you. Probably. Over the following days, they fell into a routine. Callum would wake early and build up the fire while Clara prepared breakfast. They would check the trap lines together, then spend the afternoons working on various tasks around the cabin. Callum showed Clara how to cure the rabbit hides, how to prepare venison jerky, how to carve useful items from wood. In turn, she taught him things she had learned in her clan: how to identify edible plants even under snow, how to read animal tracks with precision, how to move silently through the forest. They talked while they worked, cautious conversations at first that gradually became more open. Clara told him about life in her clan, the rigid hierarchy and constant preparations for war. Callum spoke about his childhood on a farm in the lowlands, his decision to join the militia, and his growing disillusionment with the endless cycle of violence. I used to think it was simple, he said one evening as they sat by the fire, mending clothes. Humans good, orcs bad, but the more I saw, the less sense it made. Both sides just kept killing and dying, and for what? Land that neither side could hold for long, pride. Revenge for things that happened generations ago. Clara's needle paused in her stitching. That is exactly what I said to the elders. I told them we were throwing away lives for nothing, that our young warriors were dying for pride, not survival. What did they say? That I was too weak to understand, that a true orc does not question the wisdom of those who came before. She resumed her stitching with more force than necessary. I wanted to ask them how wise it was to watch our clan shrink every year, losing warriors we could not replace. But I kept my mouth shut, that time. But not the next time. No, the next time I did not keep quiet, and it cost me everything. She fell silent for a moment, then added softly, though maybe it saved me too. If I had stayed, I would have had to become something I did not want to be. Callum understood that feeling all too well. A week passed, then 2. The winter settled in with brutal intensity, bringing storms that buried the cabin in snow and kept them inside for days at a time. During those long, quiet hours, Callum became acutely aware of Clara in ways that made him uncomfortable. The way firelight played across her green skin. How her laugh sounded when he said something that amused her, rare but genuine. The careful way she moved around the small cabin, trying to take up as little space as possible despite the fact that he had made it clear she was welcome. He caught himself watching her sometimes and forced his eyes away, disturbed by the direction his thoughts were taking. She was an orc. Even if she had been cast out by her people, Even if she was nothing like the violent warriors he had fought in the militia, the gulf between them was too wide to bridge. Humans and orcs did not form attachments. It was unthinkable, but his heart seemed not to have received that message. Clara, for her part, seemed to be having similar struggles. He caught her looking at him sometimes with an expression that made his breath catch. She would quickly glance away, a faint darker shade of green coloring her cheeks. They began to move around each other carefully, aware of every accidental touch, every moment their eyes met. The tension came to a head one evening in late winter. They had been cooped up inside for 3 days during a particularly vicious storm, and the cabin felt smaller than usual. Clara was carving a new handle for one of Callum's knives while he repaired a snowshoe. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. "I should build a second cabin," Callum said abruptly. "Or at least an addition. More space would be good." Clara looked up from her carving. "Are you saying you want me to leave?" "No." The word came out more forcefully than he intended. "No, that is not what I meant at all. I just thought for privacy it might be better if we had separate spaces." "Oh." Clara returned her attention to the knife handle, but her jaw was tight. "If that is what you want." "It is not about what I want," Callum said, frustration creeping into his voice. "It is about what is appropriate." "Appropriate." Clara set down the knife and handle with deliberate care. "And what exactly would be appropriate, Callum? Should I be more grateful? More obedient? Should I remember my place? That is not fair and you know it. Then what are you really saying?" She stood, crossing her arms. "Because from where I am standing, it sounds like you are looking for reasons to push me away." Callum set aside his snowshoe and stood as well. "I am trying to protect both of us." "From what?" "From this." He gestured between them. "From whatever this is that is happening. Clara, you have to see how impossible this is. You are an orc. I am human. Our people have been killing each other for longer than either of us has been alive. There is no future in anything beyond what we have now." Clara flinched as if he had struck her. For a moment she was silent, and Callum watched emotions flicker across her face too quickly to identify. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "You are right. Of course you are right. I am sorry for presuming otherwise." She turned and walked to the bed, lying down with her back to him. The conversation was clearly over. Callum stood by the fire for a long time, feeling like he had just made a terrible mistake but not knowing how to fix it. Finally, he prepared his own pallet and lay down, staring at the ceiling and listening to the storm rage outside. Sleep was a long time coming. The next few days were awkward. They were polite to each other, cordial even, but the easy companionship they had built was gone. Clara volunteered to check the trap lines alone. Callum found reasons to spend more time outside, cutting extra firewood they did not need. They circled each other like wary animals, careful not to get too close. Callum hated it. He hated the silence where there had been conversation. He hated the way Clara would not quite meet his eyes anymore. Most of all, he hated that he had hurt her, even though he still believed what he had said was true. The storm finally broke on the 4th day, giving way to clear skies and bitter cold. Callum was outside splitting wood when he heard Clara cry out from inside the cabin. He dropped the axe and ran, bursting through the door to find her standing in the middle of the room staring at the window. "What is it? What is wrong?" Clara pointed with a shaking hand. "There, at the tree line." "I saw someone watching the cabin." Callum moved to the window and peered out carefully. At first he saw nothing but snow and trees. Then a figure stepped out from behind a pine and his blood ran cold. It was an orc warrior, easily 7 feet tall, carrying a massive war axe. Even from this distance, Callum could see the scarred face and the bone decorations woven into his hair. "You recognize him?" Callum asked quietly. Clara's face had gone pale. Yes, his name is Garak. He is one of my clan's best trackers. If he is here, the others will not be far behind. Why would they come for you? I thought they cast you out. They did. But if they found out a human was sheltering me, that changes things. In their eyes, I have become a traitor. They will kill you and take me back to face judgment. Callum's mind raced. How many warriors does your clan have? At least 20. Maybe more. 20 against 1 were not odds Callum liked, especially since most of those 20 would be trained warriors while he was a single man 5 years out of practice. But he had not saved Clara's life just to hand her over to be executed. We need to leave, he said. Now, gather whatever you can carry. Food, warm clothes, blankets. I will get my weapons and supplies. They moved quickly and efficiently, packing in tense silence. Callum strapped on his old militia sword and filled a pack with dried meat, hard bread, and a fire-starting kit. Clara gathered blankets and extra clothing. Within 10 minutes they were ready. Callum cracked open the door and peered out. Garak had been joined by 2 more orc warriors. They were conferring together, occasionally glancing toward the cabin. They seemed to be waiting for something, probably reinforcements. The back window, Callum whispered. It opens into the woods. If we move fast and quiet, we can get a head start before they realize we are gone. They slipped out through the narrow window, dropping into snow that came up to their knees. Callum took Clara's hand and led her into the forest, moving as quickly as the deep snow allowed. He headed east, away from both his cabin and the direction of the nearest human settlement. The mountains lay that way, dangerous but offering places to hide. They moved for hours, pushing through the snow and underbrush. Callum set a brutal pace, knowing the orc warriors would move faster once they discovered their quarry had fled. Clara kept up without complaint, though he could see the strain on her face. She was stronger than she had been when he found her, but still not fully recovered. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when they finally stopped to rest in a small hollow sheltered by fallen logs. Both of them were breathing hard, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "We cannot keep this pace after dark," Clara said. "Too easy to get lost or injured." Callum knew she was right. There is a place not far from here, an old hunter's cabin that was abandoned years ago. If it is still standing, we can shelter there for the night. They found the cabin just as the last light was fading from the sky. It was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but the structure was sound and there was even a small fireplace. Best of all, it was invisible from more than 50 feet away, hidden in a dense thicket of pines. Callum got a fire going while Clara barricaded the door with pieces of old furniture left by the previous occupant. They ate a cold meal of dried meat and hard bread, not wanting to waste time cooking. Outside, the temperature continued to drop. Without the fire, they would freeze. "I am sorry," Clara said suddenly. "This is my fault. If I had left when I first offered, you would be safe in your cabin now instead of running for your life." "If you had left, you would be dead," Callum replied. "And I would rather be here with you than safe and alone, wondering what happened to you." Clara looked at him, and in the firelight her amber eyes seemed to glow. "You mean that?" "Yes." The admission felt dangerous, but he was tired of hiding from the truth. "Clara, what I said the other night about there being no future for us. I said it because I am afraid, not of you or your people, but of how I feel when I am with you. I have never felt this way about anyone, and it terrifies me." "How do you feel?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Callum moved closer, taking her hand in his. Her skin was warm despite the cold, and he could feel her pulse racing. "Like I have been asleep for years, and I am only now waking up. Like every moment I spend with you is the most real thing I have ever experienced. Like I would burn down the entire world if it meant keeping you safe." Clara made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You foolish, wonderful man. Do you know what my people would say if they heard you talking like this? I do not care what your people would say. Do you?" She was silent for a long moment, and Callum held his breath, terrified he had pushed too far. Then Clara lifted her free hand and placed it gently against his cheek. Her touch was soft, hesitant, as if she expected him to pull away. He did not pull away. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "From the moment I woke up in your arms by the fire, I have been falling for you. I tried to fight it, tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or proximity or desperation. But it is none of those things. It is love, pure and simple and impossible." Callum leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "Maybe the impossible is the only thing worth fighting for." She kissed him then, and it was like a spark catching on dry tinder. All the tension and longing of the past weeks ignited in an instant. Her lips were warm and soft, and she tasted like honey from the bread they had eaten. Callum wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, and she came willingly, her hands tangling in his hair. They broke apart eventually, both breathing hard. Clara's face was flushed darker green, and she was looking at him with such naked emotion that it made his heart ache. "Whatever happens," she said, "whatever comes next, I need you to know that these months with you have been the happiest of my life." "It is not over," Callum said fiercely. "I am not giving up on this, on us. We will find a way." "How? Where can we go that both our peoples will not hunt us?" It was a valid question, and Callum did not have a good answer. But as he held Clara close and felt the warmth of her body against his, an idea began to form in his mind. "There are other places," he said slowly, "beyond the borderlands. I have heard stories of cities in the far south where humans and orcs trade peacefully, where mixed couples are not unheard of." "Stories," Clara said skeptically. "Stories have to start somewhere. And we have nothing to lose by trying." He pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. "Will you come with me? Will you take that chance?" Clara searched his face for a long moment. Then she smiled, small and fragile but real. "Yes, I will come with you. To the ends of the earth, if that is what it takes." They held each other by the fire as the night deepened around them, two souls from opposite sides of an ancient divide, choosing to forge a new path forward together. The next morning brought fresh snow and colder temperatures. Callum and Clara ate a quick breakfast and set out again, continuing east toward the mountains. They moved carefully, staying to areas with heavy tree cover and avoiding open ground where they would be easily spotted. Around midday, they heard sounds of pursuit behind them. Callum risked a glance back and caught glimpses of figures moving through the trees. At least 6 orc warriors, maybe more, and they were gaining ground. "They are too fast," Clara panted as they ran. "We cannot outrun them." Callum's mind raced. She was right. The orc warriors were taller, stronger, and better suited to moving through harsh terrain. In a straight chase, he and Clara would be caught within hours. They needed an advantage. "This way," he said suddenly, veering north. Clara followed without question, trusting his judgment. Callum led them to a place he had discovered years ago while exploring the region. The ground rose sharply, transitioning from forest to a rocky slope studded with boulders and loose scree. It was treacherous footing, but it leveled the playing field. Size and strength mattered less when everyone had to move carefully to avoid sliding or falling. They scrambled up the slope, using their hands as much as their feet. Behind them, the orc warriors reached the base of the incline and slowed, realizing the danger. Callum and Clara kept climbing, putting precious distance between themselves and their pursuers. Near the top of the slope, Callum spotted a narrow cleft between 2 large boulders. "In there," he said, pointing. "If we can reach it, we can defend that position." They would have to come at us one at a time. They made it to the cleft with minutes to spare. Callum drew his sword and positioned himself at the opening while Clara found a heavy rock she could use as a weapon. Below them, the orc warriors had begun their ascent, moving cautiously up the unstable slope. The lead warrior was Garak, the tracker Clara had recognized. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before, finding solid footing where others might slip. When he was 20 feet away, he stopped and called out in a voice that echoed off the rocks. "Clara Corehammer, you shame yourself and your clan by hiding behind a human. Come down and face judgment with dignity." "I have done nothing wrong," Clara shouted back. "The clan cast me out. You have no claim on me anymore. You conspired with the enemy. You betrayed every orc who died fighting humans. That is treason, and the punishment is death." "She helped no one against you," Callum interjected. "She has been with me these months, living peacefully. We have harmed no one." Garak's scarred face twisted in disgust. "You know nothing, human. She is corrupted, tainted by your touch. The only mercy we can offer is a quick death rather than a slow one." "Then you will have to go through me first," the tracker laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Gladly." Garak resumed his climb, and the other warriors followed. Callum gripped his sword tighter, calculating angles and distances. The narrow cleft was a good defensive position, but he was only one man. If the warriors were willing to pay the price in blood, they would eventually overwhelm him. The first warrior to reach the cleft was not Garak but a younger orc, barely past adolescence, eager to prove himself. He came in fast and aggressive, a spear thrust toward Callum's chest. Callum sidestepped and brought his sword down in a controlled arc, cutting deep into the warrior's arm. The orc cried out and stumbled back, clutching the wound. Two more came next, working together, trying to flank Callum despite the narrow space. He was forced back into the cleft, his sword flashing in the sunlight as he parried and countered. One blade found his shoulder, drawing blood, but he managed to drive both warriors back with a flurry of strikes. Clara threw her rock with deadly accuracy, catching one of the warriors in the temple. He dropped like a stone, tumbling back down the slope. The others hesitated, reassessing their target. "Enough," Garak bellowed. "I will handle this myself." The big tracker pushed his way forward, his war axe gleaming wickedly. He was nearly twice Callum's size, with reach and strength that made the fight grotesquely one-sided. But Callum had learned long ago that smaller fighters could win if they were smarter and faster. The fight that followed was brutal and desperate. Garak's axe was a blur of lethal motion, each swing capable of splitting Callum in two if it connected. Callum ducked, dodged, and parried, his sword turning aside blows that would have killed him. He was bleeding from half a dozen small cuts, and his arms burned with fatigue. Clara threw more rocks, forcing the other warriors to keep their distance, but Callum could see them circling, looking for an opening. This could not go on much longer. He was tiring while Garak seemed tireless. Then Callum saw his chance. Garak wound up for a massive overhead swing, committing fully to the blow. Callum did not try to block. Instead, he dove forward inside the arc of the axe and drove his sword up under the tracker's ribs. Garak's eyes went wide with shock and pain. He staggered backward, the axe falling from his hands. For a moment he teetered on the edge of the slope, then gravity took over and he tumbled down, bouncing off rocks and scree until he lay still at the bottom. The other warriors stared in stunned silence. Their best tracker, their most skilled warrior, defeated by a single human. For a long moment, no one moved, then a voice called out from below, speaking in the orcish language. Clara translated in a whisper. "They are saying we killed Garak, that they should retreat and return with more warriors." But another voice responded, and this one sounded different, younger perhaps, or less certain. Clara's eyes widened as she listened. "What are they saying?" Callum asked. "One of them is saying this has gone far enough, that Garak's death was honorable combat and they should let us go. That I am already cast out, and continuing this hunt brings no honor to the clan." More voices joined in, some angry, some seemingly agreeing. The argument continued for several minutes while Callum and Clara watched tensely from their defensive position. Finally, one by one, the orc warriors began to retreat down the slope. Not all of them looked happy about it, but they went. Within minutes, the mountainside was empty except for Garak's body at the base of the slope. Callum sagged against the boulder, his sword dropping from nerveless fingers. The adrenaline that had kept him going drained away all at once, leaving him shaking. Clara was at his side immediately, her hands gentle as she examined his wounds. "You are hurt," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will live." He managed a weak smile. "Though I could use some of that orcish battlefield medicine you mentioned once." Clara laughed, though it sounded more like a sob. "You could have died, you fool. Why did you fight them? You could have given me up, saved yourself." "I told you," Callum said, cupping her face with one bloody hand. "I would burn down the world for you. A few orc warriors do not even come close." She kissed him then, heedless of the blood and dirt and pain. When they finally broke apart, both had tears on their faces. "We should move," Callum said reluctantly. "They might come back, or others might follow. We need to put as much distance between us and this place as possible." They gathered their scattered belongings and continued east, moving slowly now as Callum's wounds stiffened and pain set in. Clara helped him when he stumbled, her arm around his waist, taking some of his weight. They walked until darkness fell and they could walk no more, then made a fireless camp in a hollow between two boulders. Clara cleaned and bound Callum's wounds with strips torn from her own clothes. None were life-threatening, but he had lost blood and would need rest to recover. She made him drink from their water skin and eat some dried meat, then wrapped them both in their blankets. "Sleep," she commanded. "I will keep watch." Callum wanted to argue, but exhaustion overwhelmed him. He fell asleep with his head in Clara's lap, her fingers gently stroking his hair. He woke several times during the night, each time finding Clara still awake, her eyes scanning the darkness for threats. Toward morning, he insisted she sleep while he took a turn at watch. She resisted but eventually gave in, curling up against him and falling into exhausted slumber within minutes. As the sun rose, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Callum looked down at Clara's sleeping face and felt something shift in his chest. This was his family now. Not the parents who had died years ago. Not the militia brothers who had turned their backs on him when he refused to follow an immoral order. This orc woman who had been cast out by her own people, who had nearly died in the cold, who had chosen to love him despite every logical reason not to. They traveled for 8 more days, moving steadily east and then south once they cleared the mountains. The terrain grew less harsh, the temperature slightly warmer. They saw no more signs of pursuit, and gradually they allowed themselves to believe they might actually escape. On the 9th day they came across a road, the first real sign of civilization they had encountered. Callum studied it carefully, then made a decision. "We follow this south. It should lead to trading posts eventually, maybe even a town." "Are you certain that is wise?" Clara asked. "Humans will not react well to seeing us together." "Probably not," Callum agreed. "But we cannot live in the wilderness forever. We need supplies, information about the southern cities, maybe even passage on a merchant caravan. That means dealing with people for better or worse." They followed the road for 2 days before encountering anyone. A merchant wagon came rumbling north, pulled by 2 enormous draft horses and driven by a stout, bearded man who looked like he had spent his entire life on the road. He saw them and immediately pulled the horses to a stop, his hand moving to a crossbow mounted on the wagon seat. Callum raised both hands in a peaceful gesture. "We mean no harm. We are just travelers heading south." The merchant's eyes flicked between Callum and Clara, his expression suspicious. "That is an orc you have got there. Her name is Clara and she is with me." "With you?" The merchant made it sound like an accusation. "What kind of man travels with an orc?" "The kind who knows better than to judge people by their race," Callum said evenly. "Now, are you going to shoot us, or can we discuss this like civilized people?" The merchant considered for a long moment, then slowly moved his hand away from the crossbow. "I am not looking for trouble. But you need to understand, most places you go, people are going to have problems with your arrangement." "So we have been told," Clara said, speaking for the first time. "We are looking to get south to the free cities. Do you know how far it is?" The merchant's eyebrows rose at hearing Clara speak perfect human language. 200 miles at least. Maybe closer to 300 depending on which city you are aiming for. That is a long walk, especially this time of year. "Do merchant caravans pass this way often?" Callum asked. "Often enough. There is a trading post about 50 miles south where caravans gather before making the push to the free cities. You might be able to buy passage there if you have coin and if any captain is willing to take you." "We have a little coin," Callum said. It was not strictly true, but he had some items they could sell if needed. "Thank you for the information." The merchant nodded slowly. "Word of advice, friend. When you get to the trading post, talk to a woman named Vera who runs the general store. She has got an open mind about certain things, if you catch my meaning. She might be able to point you towards someone willing to help." "We appreciate it," Clara said. The merchant flicked his reins and the wagon began moving again. As he passed them, he called out, "You two got courage, I will give you that. Good luck." They found the trading post exactly where the merchant had said it would be. It was a ramshackle collection of buildings clustered around a crossroads, with a large stable, a general store, a blacksmith, and what looked like a tavern with rooms for rent. A dozen wagons were parked in a makeshift yard, their owners presumably preparing for the journey south. Callum and Clara entered the general store with some trepidation. Inside, a tall woman with iron-gray hair was restocking shelves. She looked up as they entered, her eyes widening slightly when she saw Clara, but her expression remained neutral. "Help you with something?" she asked. "Are you Vera?" Callum inquired. "Depends on who is asking. We were told you might be able to help us find passage south, to the free cities." Vera set down the box she was holding and studied them both carefully. "That is orc you have got with you is not a prisoner or a slave." "She is my partner," Callum said firmly. "I see." Vera moved behind the counter and pulled out a ledger. "And you are both heading south by choice?" "Yes," Clara said. "We are looking for a place where we can live without having to hide what we are to each other." Vera's stern expression softened slightly. "Brave of you. Foolish maybe, but brave." She flipped through her ledger. "There is a caravan master named Jacob Griffith who might help you. He has got his own reasons for being sympathetic to unusual situations. You will find him at the tavern, probably drinking and telling tall tales." "Thank you," Callum said. "We are grateful for any help." "Do not thank me yet. Jacob will want payment and it will not be cheap." Vera paused. "You two need supplies, food, better clothes, anything like that." Callum assessed their situation honestly. "We could use everything, but we have limited coin." "I will tell you what," Vera said. "I need someone to help unload a shipment that came in yesterday. My usual boy broke his arm last week and I am behind on everything. You help me with that, and I will give you fair trade on supplies." "Deal." They spent the afternoon hauling crates and barrels, organizing Vera's storeroom and doing various odd jobs around the trading post. Vera was a fair but demanding employer, and by the time evening fell, Callum's wounds were aching and both he and Clara were exhausted. But Vera made good on her word, providing them with new clothes, better boots, food supplies, and even a sturdy knife for Clara. "Now get yourselves to the tavern," Vera said as she locked up the store. "Jakob usually holds court there after sunset. Tell him I sent you, and that I said to give you a fair price." The tavern was warm and crowded, full of merchants, caravan guards, and various travelers. Callum and Clara drew stares as they entered, and the conversations quieted noticeably. But no one confronted them, and after a moment the noise level returned to normal. They found Jakob Griffith at a corner table, exactly as described. He was a mountain of a man with a thick black beard and laugh lines around his eyes. He was in the middle of telling a story to a group of younger men, gesturing wildly with a mug of ale. "And then the damn bear stood up on its hind legs, and I swear it was 12 feet tall if it was an inch," Jakob was saying. "But did I run? Hell no. I looked that bear right in the eyes and I said," he broke off as he noticed Callum and Clara approaching. "Well now, this is interesting. You two need something. We are looking for passage south," Callum said. "Vera told us you might be able to help." Jakob's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Did she now? Vera does not send people to me unless she thinks they are worth the trouble." He gestured to empty chairs at his table. "Sit. Let us talk business." They sat, and Jakob studied them both intently. "I am going to be direct with you because I do not see the point in dancing around it. You are human, she is orc, and you are clearly together in a way that most people are not going to approve of. That about sum it up." "Yes," Clara said. "All right. Here is the situation. I run a tight operation. My guards follow orders, I pay fair wages, and I do not tolerate trouble. If you come with my caravan, you will work. I will not have passengers sitting around doing nothing while my people bust their backs." "Can you fight?" "I was militia for 5 years, Callum said. "Infantry and some scout work." "And you?" Jakob looked at Clara. "I was trained as a hunter and warrior by my clan. I can use a bow, spear, or axe." Jakob nodded slowly. "Good, I can use people who know which end of a weapon to hold. Here is my offer. You work as caravan guards. You will stand watches, help defend against bandits or wildlife, and do whatever other jobs I need. In exchange, I will give you passage, food, and a small wage. When we reach the free cities, you will have enough coin to get established." "How does that sound?" "More than fair," Callum said. "When do you leave?" 3 days. "We are waiting on one more shipment, then we head south. Be here at dawn 3 days from now, ready to travel." Jakob extended his huge hand. "We got a deal." Callum shook his hand, then Clara did the same. "We have a deal." The next 3 days passed quickly. Callum and Clara made themselves useful around the trading post, earning a few extra coins and goodwill from the local merchants. They slept in the tavern's common room, which was cheap but crowded. On their last evening, they took a walk outside the settlement, following a small stream that ran through a grove of trees. "Are you scared?" Clara asked as they sat on a fallen log, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Terrified," Callum admitted. "Everything we are doing is a gamble. We are betting our future on stories about southern cities where humans and orcs coexist peacefully. What if those stories are wrong? What if we get there and find it is just like everywhere else?" "Then we keep looking," Clara said. "We find somewhere more remote, build a cabin like you had, and live our lives away from everyone else. It would not be the worst fate." Callum took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I suppose not. As long as we are together, I think I can handle anything." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never imagined my life would turn out like this. 6 months ago I was in my clan, miserable and angry, seeing no path forward. Then I was cast out and nearly died. And now I am here with you, about to start a journey to an uncertain future. And somehow, despite everything, I am happier than I have ever been. That is the power of love, Callum said softly. It makes even the impossible feel worthwhile. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, holding each other close against the evening chill. The caravan assembled at dawn 3 days later. There were 15 wagons in total, loaded with trade goods ranging from furs and timber to finished metalwork and preserved foods. Jakob employed 20 guards, including Callum and Clara, along with wagon drivers and various support staff. It was a substantial operation, and Callum could see why Jakob had a reputation for running tight ships. Jakob assigned them to different positions. Callum rode with the rear guard, watching for threats from behind, while Clara was positioned as an outrider on the left flank. It separated them during the day, but Jakob explained it was intentional. "I need experienced people spread out," he told them. "If trouble hits, I want someone who knows what they are doing in every position, nothing personal." The journey south was long but largely uneventful. They traveled through rolling hills and dense forests, following roads that ranged from well-maintained to little more than dirt tracks. The weather held, cold but dry, which made for good traveling conditions. Callum got to know some of the other guards during evening camps. Most were professional caravan security, men and women who made their living protecting merchant goods. A few were veterans like Callum, drawn to the work because their skills did not transfer well to peaceful occupations. They were a pragmatic bunch, more interested in whether someone could hold their position in a fight than what race they were. Clara had a harder time. As the only orc in the caravan, she faced suspicion and open hostility from some of the merchants. More than once Callum overheard comments about how Jakob was taking risks by hiring her, how orcs could not be trusted, how she was probably scouting for a raid. Clara endured it with quiet dignity, doing her job efficiently and giving no one cause for complaint. The situation came to a head 2 weeks into the journey. They had stopped for the evening at a wide clearing with good sight lines. Callum was helping set up the defensive perimeter when he heard raised voices from the center of camp. He ran toward the sound and found Clara facing off against 3 merchants, all of whom looked angry. "I am telling you, she has been sending signals," one of them was saying. "I have seen her making gestures toward the tree line. She is calling in a raiding party." "That is ridiculous," Clara said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I was doing my job, watching for threats. Watching for your friends, more like," another merchant spat. "We all know orcs cannot be trusted. Jakob was a fool to hire you." Callum stepped between Clara and the merchants. "That is enough. Clara has done nothing wrong, and I will not stand here and let you slander her." "Oh, here comes her pet human to defend her," the first merchant sneered. "Everyone knows you two are sleeping together. You are as much a traitor as she is." Callum's hand moved to his sword hilt, but before the situation could escalate further, Jakob's voice cut through the argument like a whip crack. "What the hell is going on here?" Everyone began talking at once, but Jakob raised a hand for silence. "One at a time. You first." He pointed to the first merchant. The merchant laid out his accusations, claiming Clara had been signaling to potential enemies, and that her presence endangered the entire caravan. The other 2 merchants supported his claims, though Callum noticed their stories did not quite match up on the details. "Clara," Jakob said, "your side." "I was doing exactly what you told me to do," Clara replied evenly, watching the flanks, checking the tree line for threats. "I made no signals, sent no messages. These men are looking for an excuse to get rid of me." Jakob turned to the other guards who had gathered. "Anyone else see Clara doing anything suspicious?" The guards looked at each other. Finally, one of them, a grizzled veteran named Marcus, spoke up. "I have been watching everyone on this caravan, boss. Part of the job. Clara has been doing her work and nothing else. If she was signaling someone, I would have seen it." Jakob nodded slowly, then turned back to the merchants. "Here is how this is going to work. Clara stays with the caravan. She has done nothing to warrant being sent away. If any of you have a problem with that, you are welcome to leave the caravan and travel on your own. I hear the roads are lovely this time of year." The merchants protested, but Jakob cut them off. "My caravan, my rules. You hired me because I get shipments through safely. Trust my judgment or leave. Your choice." The merchants backed down, though their expressions remained hostile. The crowd dispersed, and Callum found Clara standing alone, her shoulders tight with tension. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I knew this would happen eventually," she said. "I have dealt with worse from my own clan, but it still hurts, being treated like a monster when I have done nothing wrong." Callum pulled her into a hug, not caring who saw. "You are not a monster. You are the bravest, strongest person I know. And anyone who cannot see that is a fool." She held him tightly for a moment, then pulled back. "Thank you for standing up for me. Always," Callum promised. Jakob approached them a few minutes later. "Sorry about that. I should have seen it coming and headed it off." "It is not your fault," Clara said. "People are who they are. Maybe. But it reminds me why I take on cases like yours. The world is too damn full of people who cannot see past their own prejudices." He paused. "For what it is worth, you are one of the best guards I have ever hired. You have good instincts and you do not panic under pressure. I would be glad to have you on future caravans if you ever need work." "That means more than you know," Clara said. After that incident, several of the other guards made a point of being friendlier to Clara. Marcus in particular took her under his wing, sharing stories from his 30 years of caravan work and teaching her tricks for long-distance travel. It did not make up for the continued hostility from some of the merchants, but it helped. 3 weeks into the journey, they had their first real test. The caravan was passing through a region of dense forest when arrows came whistling out of the trees. 2 drivers were hit before anyone could react, one taking an arrow in the shoulder, the other in the leg. "Bandits!" Jakob roared. "Defensive circle. Guards forward." The wagons pulled into a tight formation while the guards rushed to the perimeter. Callum counted at least a dozen attackers in the trees, probably more. These were not opportunistic thieves but an organized band, well-equipped and coordinated. Clara was already in position on the left flank, her bow out and loosing arrows with mechanical precision. Callum saw 2 bandits fall from her shots before he reached his own position. The bandits charged, screaming war cries, and the battle was joined. Callum's militia training came back instantly. He fought in a defensive line with 3 other guards, his sword moving in efficient arcs to keep the bandits at bay. To his right, Marcus fought with the calm competence of a veteran. To his left, a younger guard named Tom was holding his ground despite obvious fear. The bandits were skilled, but they had underestimated the caravan's defenses. Jakob had hired good people and they worked together seamlessly. Gradually, the attack faltered. The bandits began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them, and within minutes the forest was silent except for the groans of injured men on both sides. "Status report," Jakob called out. Callum did a quick check of his area. 2 wounded here, neither life-threatening. 4 bandits down. Similar reports came in from around the perimeter. In total, the caravan had suffered 5 wounded and no dead. The bandits had lost at least 8 men, maybe more. It could have been much worse. Clara approached Callum, her bow still in hand. "You are bleeding," she said, pointing to a cut on his arm. "So are you," Callum replied, noting the blood running down her cheek from a gash near her hairline. They patched each other up while Jakob organized the cleanup. The injured were treated and made comfortable in the wagons. The dead bandits were searched for valuables, then left for the crows. It was harsh, but such was the law of the road. That evening, several of the merchants who had complained about Clara approached her. "We wanted to say we were wrong," one of them said awkwardly. "You fought well today." "Saved lives, we are grateful," Clara nodded stiffly. "I did my job, nothing more." It was not a full reconciliation, but it was a start. After that, the hostile comments decreased significantly. Clara had proven herself in the way that mattered most to these practical merchant folk, through action rather than words. The journey continued. They passed through small villages and trading posts, gradually leaving the northern forests behind. The landscape changed, becoming more open, with rolling farmland interspersed with patches of forest. The weather warmed slightly, winter loosening its grip as they moved south. 6 weeks after leaving the northern trading post, the caravan crested a hill, and Callum saw something that took his breath away. Spread out in the valley below was a city unlike any he had ever seen. It was huge, easily 5 times the size of the largest settlement he had visited during his militia days. But what made it truly remarkable was the diversity visible even from a distance. He could see different architectural styles, banners from what must be a dozen different races and cultures, and walls that clearly served more to mark boundaries than to defend. "Welcome to Crosshaven," Jakob said, pulling his horse up beside Callum. "The freest of the free cities, where anyone can live and work as long as they follow the law and pay their taxes." "It is real," Clara whispered, joining them. "All those stories we heard, they were real." "Oh, it is real all right," Jakob confirmed. "Been coming here for 20 years and it still amazes me every time." "You two are going to do just fine here." They descended into the valley, and as they got closer, Callum could see more details. Orcs walking alongside humans in the streets, dwarves operating market stalls. Even a few beings he could not identify, tall and graceful with features that seemed almost ethereal. No one was fighting. No one seemed afraid. It was just people going about their lives, buying and selling, laughing and talking. The caravan passed through the main gates without incident. The guards there barely glanced at Clara, too busy checking manifests and collecting entry taxes to care about the race of individual travelers. Jakob led them to a large warehouse district where the merchants would unload and sell their goods. "This is where we part ways," Jakob said, handing Callum a pouch of coins. "Your wages plus a bit extra. You both earned it. If you need help getting established, talk to the Guild of Laborers on Market Street. They help newcomers find work and lodging." "Thank you," Callum said, shaking the big man's hand, "for everything. Just remember to pay it forward someday. Help the next desperate couple who needs it." Jakob smiled. "Good luck to you both." Callum and Clara walked into Crosshaven with their packs on their backs and their entire future ahead of them. The city was overwhelming at first, a maze of streets and buildings that seemed to go on forever. But they found the Guild of Laborers easily enough, and the clerk there was helpful in a brisk, efficient way. "Looking for work and lodging," the clerk said, not even blinking at the sight of an orc and human together. "What skills do you have?" Callum listed his experience: farming, hunting, carpentry, some blacksmith work, and militia training. Clara mentioned her hunting skills and her knowledge of leather working. The clerk made notes on a piece of parchment. "You should not have trouble finding work. Lots of need for people with practical skills. As for lodging, there is a boarding house on 7th Street that takes in newcomers. Clean, safe, affordable. Tell the owner that Marcus sent you." The clerk tore off a piece of paper with an address written on it. "Anything else?" "Is there really no problem with us being together?" Clara asked hesitantly. "A human and an orc." The clerk finally looked up, studying them both. "Not legally, if that is what you are asking. Crosshaven does not care about race mixing. Some individuals might give you grief, especially in the more conservative neighborhoods, but the city guard will step in if anyone gets violent. This is a place of laws, not prejudice." It was more than they had dared hope for. They found the boarding house easily. The owner, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, showed them to a small room on the 2nd floor. It had a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a window that looked out onto the street. It was not much, but it was theirs. "We made it," Clara said, sitting on the bed and looking around in wonder. "We actually made it." Callum sat beside her and took her hand. "We did. Together." She leaned against him and they sat in comfortable silence, processing everything that had happened. From the moment Callum had found Clara dying in the snow to this room in a free city, it felt like a lifetime had passed. In some ways, it had. They were not the same people they had been at the start of this journey. Over the following weeks, they settled into their new life. Callum found work at a carpentry shop, while Clara got hired by a tannery that specialized in quality leather goods. The work was steady, the pay fair, and for the first time in either of their lives, they felt safe. They explored Crosshaven in their free time, marveling at its diversity. There were temples to gods neither of them had heard of, restaurants serving food from distant lands, and markets where you could buy almost anything imaginable. They saw mixed-race couples everywhere, human and orc, human and dwarf, even some combinations Callum could not begin to categorize. 3 months after their arrival, Callum came home to find Clara standing at the window, staring out at the sunset. She turned when she heard him enter, and there were tears on her cheeks. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong," she said, wiping her eyes. "I have just been thinking about how much my life has changed. A year ago, I was trapped in a clan that hated me, heading toward a future that terrified me. And now I am here, in this incredible city, with a job I enjoy and a man I love. It feels like a dream." Callum crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up." "Callum," Clara said softly, pulling back to look at him. "Will you marry me?" He blinked in surprise. "What?" "I know it is traditionally the man who asks, but I do not care about tradition. We have already broken every rule about how our lives were supposed to go. Why stop now?" She was smiling through her tears. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, officially, legally, in every way that matters. So will you marry me, Callum Grayson?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. They kissed, long and deep, the setting sun painting them both in golden light. The wedding took place 2 months later in a small chapel that specialized in mixed-race unions. Jakob traveled down from the north to attend, along with Marcus and several other friends they had made in the caravan. Vera sent a gift, a beautiful quilt she had made herself. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, officiated by a priest who had married dozens of couples just like them. When it came time to exchange vows, Callum spoke from his heart. "Clara, you are my salvation and my future. You taught me that love is stronger than hate, that hope can survive even in the darkest moments. I promise to stand by you, to protect you, and to love you for all the days of my life." Clara's voice was thick with emotion as she replied, "Callum, you saved my life in more ways than one. You showed me kindness when I expected cruelty, love when I expected hate. You gave me hope for a future I never thought I could have." I promise to honor you, to support you, and to love you with everything I am forever." The priest pronounced them husband and wife, and when they kissed, the small gathering of friends erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration afterward was joyous, full of food and drink and laughter. Jakob told outrageous stories about his years on the road. Marcus taught Clara a drinking song from his youth. Callum found himself surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them, who were happy to see them happy, and it filled him with a profound sense of gratitude. Later, when the party had wound down and they returned to their room, now officially a married couple, Clara took Callum's hands in hers. "Thank you," she said, "for finding me that day, for not walking away, for giving me a chance at this life." "Thank you for taking that chance," Callum replied. "For trusting me when you had every reason not to. For fighting alongside me and dreaming with me. You made me believe in love again, Clara. You made me believe in a better future." They held each other as night fell over Crosshaven. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for their love and won. 6 months after the wedding, Callum came home to find Clara standing in the kitchen, staring at a letter in her hands. Her expression was unreadable and he felt a spike of concern. "What is it?" he asked. Clara looked up at him and to his surprise she was smiling. "It is from my mother. Someone in my old clan told her where to find me. She wants to meet, to talk." "That is wonderful," Callum said cautiously. "Is it not? I think so. I hope so." Clara set the letter down. "She says she is proud of me, that I was right about the clan needing to change, that she has been working with some of the younger orcs to push for peace talks with the human settlements. She wants my help." Callum considered this. "What do you want to do?" "I want to see her. I want to help if I can, but I am also scared. What if it is a trap? What if the clan wants to punish me after all?" "Then we face it together," Callum said firmly. "We have come too far to let fear control us now. If you want to see your mother, we will make it happen safely." They arranged to meet Clara's mother in a neutral location, a small village halfway between Crosshaven and the Orc clan territories. Jakob agreed to escort them, bringing some of his guards for added security. It was nerve-wracking, but Callum refused to let Clara go alone. The meeting took place in a tavern, public enough to be safe but private enough for honest conversation. Clara's mother arrived with 2 younger orcs, both unarmed as agreed. When she saw Clara, her stern expression crumbled and she pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. "I am so sorry," she said in Orcish, which Callum had been learning. "I should have protected you better, should have stood up for you against the elders." "You did what you could," Clara replied, returning the embrace. "I understand that now." They talked for hours, Clara's mother explaining the changes happening in the clan. The endless raids had taken their toll and many orcs were questioning the old ways. There was talk of establishing trade agreements with human settlements, of finding ways to coexist rather than constantly fight. It would be a slow process, generations maybe, but the seeds of change had been planted. "Your story has become something of a legend among the younger orcs," Clara's mother said. "The woman who chose love over hate, who found a new life in the free cities. Some call you a traitor, but others see you as brave, as proof that another path is possible." Clara gripped Callum's hand under the table. "I just did what I had to do to survive. I never meant to become a symbol." "We rarely get to choose what we become to others," her mother replied, "but you can choose whether to use that influence for good. If you were willing to come back occasionally to speak to the younger generation, it might help move things forward." Clara looked at Callum, silently asking his opinion. He squeezed her hand and nodded. This was her decision, but he would support whatever she chose. "I will help," Clara said finally. "Not by returning to live with the clan, that life is behind me, but I can visit. I can talk to those who are willing to listen. If it means fewer people dying in pointless raids, it is worth the risk." Her mother smiled, and Callum saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you. That is all I can ask." They said their goodbyes an hour later with promises to meet again in 3 months. Clara held herself together until they were back in the carriage, then she broke down crying. Callum held her while she sobbed out months of suppressed grief and relief. "I thought I had lost her forever," Clara said when she could speak again. "I thought choosing you meant giving up my entire family, but maybe I do not have to lose everything. Maybe I can have both." "You can have anything you want," Callum said softly. "You have earned it." True to her word, Clara began making regular trips north to speak with orc clans who were open to change. Callum always accompanied her, and Jakob was happy to provide security. It was slow, difficult work. Many orcs remained hostile to the idea of peace with humans, and there were times when Clara was shouted down or threatened. But gradually, more voices joined her cause. Young orcs who were tired of war, mothers who had lost children in raids, elders who could see their clans slowly dying. 2 years after their wedding, a historic event occurred: the first formal peace treaty between a human settlement and an orc clan. Clara and Callum attended the signing ceremony, watching as leaders from both sides put their marks on the document. It was a small step, covering only a tiny region of the borderlands, but it was a start. "You ever miss it?" Clara asked one evening as they sat on the roof of their boarding house, watching the stars come out over Crosshaven. "Your old life before you found me?" Callum considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Life was easier when I did not have to worry about peace treaties and clan politics. But miss my old life? No, that was existing, not living. You taught me the difference." "We taught each other," Clara corrected. She rested her head on his shoulder. "I keep thinking about that day you found me. I was so close to dying. Another hour, maybe less, and I would have frozen to death under that tree. What were the chances that you would be checking your traps right then? That you would choose to help instead of walking away?" "I do not believe in fate," Callum said, "but I believe in choices. And every choice we made brought us to this moment. You chose to question your clan's teachings. I chose not to execute innocent prisoners. You chose to trust me despite every reason not to. I chose to fight for you. We chose to come to Crosshaven to build this life together. And I would make every one of those choices again," Clara said. "So would I." They sat in comfortable silence, holding each other under the stars, two people from different worlds who had found their way to each other. The path had been hard, full of danger and uncertainty, but they had walked it together, and that made all the difference. Below them, Crosshaven bustled with life. Humans and orcs and countless other races went about their evening business, proof that different peoples could coexist in peace. It was not perfect. There were still incidents, still prejudice, still those who clung to the old hatreds. But progress was being made, one small step at a time. And at the heart of it all, in a small room in a boarding house on 7th Street, two people loved each other against all odds. Their story would inspire others, would help change minds and open hearts. But for Callum and Clara, it was enough simply to be together, to have fought for their love and won. Years later, when they had a proper house on the outskirts of Crosshaven and children playing in the yard, Clara would sometimes tell them the story of how she and their father met. About the day she was shaking blue with cold, and he built a roaring fire and held her close to it. About how that simple act of kindness had saved not just her life, but given both of them a future neither had dared imagine. And the children would listen with wide eyes, marveling at their parents' courage, already learning that love could overcome anything if you were willing to fight for it. But that was still to come. For now, on this evening, Callum and Clara sat on a roof in Crosshaven, watching the stars and dreaming of all the tomorrows they would share. The journey that had begun with a man finding a dying orc in the snow had led them here, to this moment of peace and contentment. And whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together, always together.